I'm in a little bit of a difficult position, as are many of you, I'm sure, because I have a belief in intellectual honesty. I don't know that my beliefs are correct, but I do know that I have to try to be honest, because if we're not honest, or if we're not at least trying to be honest, all of us, then ignorance wins. Many of us rely on the educational institutions which have been authorized by the state. And this is understandable because that's the only way to get certification for employment in any kind of field which will compensate you well. So, this is a necessity, a pragmatic necessity. If you want a good job, you must go to a place of education sponsored by or approved by the state. This means that all of the curriculum that you are exposed to has been authorized by the state. If you think that the sampling of the intellectual world that you got while you were at college was complete, then you have to be deluding yourself. Because the objectives of the broader political system should be transparent. We are moving towards something, and that something is not freedom or even nationalism. It's international commercial domination in the guise of socialism. What happens when you centralize the production of resources, centralize the distribution of goods through social programs? You give a very small number of people power. We often think that the modern left is the advocacy of equality, and this is something that we can all find intrinsically valuable. The notion that any two humans deserve, at some level, a similar quality of life. There's no reason, just because you were born with better genetics or, a better family environment or into a better community, that you should experience a life that is full of, whatever you want, while there are others who basically, just by the happenstance of birth, live a life of want. We can understand that we want to bridge this gap, but this is not what socialism does. Socialism only has the means to provide goods to the bottom. It provides those things that those people need. And this seems like a good thing at face value. But what is that? That's the centralization of resources in the hands of the distributor. And that means that, as always happens, that very small political class will have keys to a larger power than any individual private capitalist could ever hope to achieve. This is why many of the best capitalists rotate in and out of the private and public sectors. We see that through government, through this social government, we can advance our individual interests, and that's obviously what's been going on. If you look at the income distribution, as we've increased our social programs, we've also increased our inequality. This does not make sense. As we've given more resources to the poor have become more distant from the rich. Now, my opinion is you don't give people fish. You show them how to fish and you leave them alone. And, not all of us are fishermen, but all of us could be farmers, and there's no reason in the land as fertile and as abundant as the United States where any of us should be lacking that basic fundamental right to own something that can yield further wealth. When you're given food stamps, you can't turn that into an investment. If you're given land, you can turn that into anything you want. Wouldn't that be a nice way of increasing equality? Give people the land. Unfortunately, most of the land is held by about 1% of the population, and it's the same 1% of the population that is rotating in and out of the public and private sectors. This is a game, and it's a really mean one. It's not designed to give anyone a leg up, and any further propagation of it we should see is the propagation of an evil. It's the propagation of slavery. I mean, money is a construct even, and it's a useful one. It's a very useful one. I personally like it. I like the idea that I can exchange something that I do of value and get something that someone else does, which I value even more than my own time. I enjoy that. But when we exist in a context wherein the basic necessities of life require an inexorbitant amount of time and energy to sustain, then we cut ourselves off as, the bottom class from a possibility of advancement. If we're wasting all of our time paying rent, then how exactly are we moving anywhere in this life? Meanwhile, there is a more lucky class of people out there, and these are many of my friends on Facebook, and this is why I have a hard time here, because they go on with their lives, they earn the income that they desire, many of them vote Democrat, and they're happy, and they don't see the reason why the system needs to dramatically change. They see that this inequality issue is bad and we need to fix it somehow. Maybe we should give more stuff to the poor. Unfortunately, this is not consistent with an advancing spiritual world. We're materialists. We believe in stuff, and at first it doesn't seem that bad. But material is an abstraction. Material is a conception of man. And without that concept, all we have are our experiences. And then the ontology reveals itself to be what it is, primarily experiential. What we are is spirit, not matter. We are thought, not objects. And the more we conceive of the world as a realm of objects, the less we can see the possibilities of thought which open themselves up to us. Materiality is a slave system. When you surround yourself with objects that you have purchased, and when you surround your children with objects that you have purchased, you and your children adopt this mentality, which says, the world is a thing which I can move around through, and in which I can find items which I desire. This isn't the world. The world can be made whatever we want. There are no objects. There are only potentialities. This we know at a quantum mechanical level. The world is not particles. The world is a field of probability, of possibility. And it is up to us, through our observation, to determine the state of the present. Obviously, the present is not possibility. The present is what is. It's the definition of this moment. All the information contained therein. We, as this moment, can experience visualization of a future, of a possible future. And any future that you might possibly imagine is possible. It can be done. If you want a colony on the moon, maybe it'll take a while, but you can do it. If you want to fly to another star, if you want to, you can make the Earth into whatever you want. All the matter is out there, all the building material. Harnessing it is not an issue. It is not scarce. Matter is not scarce. Matter is abundant. It's infinite. We can hardly call it matter. Matter, I see what it refers to in thought, but in a very real sense, it's not solid. It can be made into anything. All we have to do is accept that we are the ones who do all of this. It is us. It is our ideas. It is our ideas which are the driving force, not the material circumstance that we are born into. This is the fallacy. Materialism has us in a room filled with objects, which we don't change, but we use. The world is filled with political opinions that we don't create, we use. I have this palette of options, I select one and I identify with it, and I'm supposed to be satisfied by that. I'm not satisfied by that. Why should anyone be satisfied by anything less than the actualization of the world which they see? Why is it that the politicians are the ones concerned with actualizing the world that they see? Is it for us? Well, thank you, politician man, for being so kind as to devote your time to realize the image of the world which you know I ought to have. I'm no slave. I don't need that. I need the opportunity to do what I am. The politicians can do what they are. Just stay away from me. Now, is there a problem with enjoying what this is? I don't think so, but you have to be honest with yourself. The more you propagate it, the more you keep enslaved individuals who do not want to be a part of it. Not everyone likes this, and that's the horrible part about this. We don't accept that. We don't even consider the possibility that not everyone wants to be brought into this progressive unity. We're all coming together. Humanity is coming together. Well, it's coming together under the guidance of a very few people, and those people are the ones whose material interests are really being served, and the vast majority of humanity is being stepped on. Why do we trust this progress of humanity? Why do we march all to the same beat, the beat of the elite? It's a horrible one. It's a bad beat, and I'd rather make up my own. This is the way that I feel about the world, and perhaps it's not the way that you feel. But who is anyone to say that the opinions of real human beings who are born into real circumstances, just like you, are any less legitimate just because they do not hold the money? Is the money the arbiter of who has authority? The money's an abstraction. It's an arbiter of who has influence. And we allow this influence to occur because we buy into this system. As long as our money is tied into a fiat system regulated by international bankers, we can't hope to have our individual low-income American interests served. Do you know what nations are for? Nations are not about bringing people together. Nations are about protecting the people as they are. It's about defending the identity of the people. Nations don't spring forward. America is an anomaly. Nations do not spring forward out of an enunciation of a value, and people don't jump towards that value. Nations spring forward organically out of an innate native composition, and the interests of the nation are the interests of the people. Now, does it have to be democratic? No, because democracies, at least the kind that we're familiar with in the modern world, lead to the same thing all the time. They lead to oligarchy and eventually autocracy. The system takes over. The interest is predictable. We know how to interact with groups. Groups of humans are very easy to predict. We know how they behave. So voting doesn't mean anything. The scientists of human behavior are just competing against each other to manipulate the humans in this ever-advancing game of politics. It's not representation. In what sense could you possibly conceive it to be representation? The views that are being represented, as I said before, are being selected out of a set of options. It's an absurdity to say that this is a representative system. It's a system wherein individuals are conned into thinking they have a voice because they have a vote. And a vote seems close enough, but it's a world apart. Most of us are lazy enough to just accept it and move on and do something entertaining for ourselves, but you are propagating slavery when you do that. When you just leave it aside, why do I keep on fixating on this stuff? Why don't I move on to something more healthy for myself? Because I care about humanity. I care about advancing the cause of liberty and creativity. The world is spirit. The world is not matter. We make the world. It is us. The world is not predetermined. Our political destiny is not predetermined. And yet that is the dialogue. The dialogue is, how do we, as this fixed, rigid system, respond to this environment, which is changing, but ultimately rooted in a past which obligates us to respond. We have to remember that at any moment, we could all step outside, forget about what we were doing, and start something new. At any moment. We won't, because that's not the science of human behavior. That's not crowds. That's not the way people are. It's the way an individual can be, but as long as we keep on only fighting for our individual freedom, the majority will remain enslaved. Do we give up on our fellow man, or do we believe that action is necessary? I've tried. I've tried again and again. I've spoken and I've spoken. I've made my beliefs known. But it doesn't matter. Because as I said before, it's not your voice. It's your vote. And your vote is much less important than your voice. The less we exercise our voices, the more we give in to sharing these memes that we find on social networking sites instead of sharing our own ideas, the more we succumb to this materialist, slavish system, and the further removed we are from a possibility of true advancement. If you want progress, you want humanity to advance, then give humanity control of its own destiny. Do not give the control to a select group of politicians. We know politicians are shit people. We know they're liars. Why is this even an option for us? Why do we consider this as a valid mode of representation? Rich motherfuckers who sit in their comfortable position telling the poor people that they'll do whatever. It's a fantasy to believe it's anything other than the same old tyranny that has been going since we were a colony of Brits. And before that, when Britain was a colony of Rome. We're playing the same Republican game. And it's not for us. It never has been. No amount of delusion should persuade you of that. The only reason why liberty, fraternity, democracy succeeded in the 17th and 18th century was because of the technology which brought about an equaling of these power structures. The gun. The guns that were used during this time could be mass-produced. That was a revolution. Napoleon's army existed because peasants were allowed to pick up these mass-produced weapons and go challenge the old order because they didn't have anything better. And for a little while, it looked like something might come of it, but then very quickly we realized as soon as the power structure implants itself, it starts caring about its own material interest. It doesn't care about the people. And it's even more of a fantasy today because we know that we are not in an equal position to fight with our government. We know that no armed revolution could succeed unless it was backed by the military. This is a tyrannical system. Why do the police treat us as if we're automatically criminals? Why are we searched at our airports? Why are people constantly on our televisions, British people like Piers Morgan, telling us that we shouldn't have our weapons? Because we hurt each other. Really? Well, we do hurt each other. That's true. But our government hurts us a lot more than any of us. Governments kill more people than any private individuals could possibly hope to. So this is a difficult subject, I suppose, to be talking about. And, of anyone from Facebook who clicked on this and is still watching, thank you for listening. And I'm sorry if I sound upset. It's not at any one of the people. It's at the ignorance of everyone. We are all ignorant of something, and we allow it because it's convenient, it's easy, and it's easier still to direct our energies towards our own advancement, our personal advancement. That's what the system wants. The more we're fighting for ourselves, each of us, just getting our little piece, the more this goes on. There's no other way. There's no action that I can propose that would change anything. All I can do is say what I think. That's all you can do either. Stop giving in to peer pressure. See the world for what you know it to be, and advocate for that world which you know could exist. Thank you for listening.